Okay, so we are officially live, and we couldn't be more excited to discuss the second half of Jurassic Park. Before we begin, I always want to thank our wonderful co-hosts here. We have a couple of new faces that we've seen throughout our discussions, one of which you've never seen before, and we'll get to all of our introductions very soon. But I do want to thank all of my co-hosts, ones who are here live with us tonight, but also all of those co-hosts who have been in the comments, in our discussions outside, in our Discord. Just thank you so much to everyone who has been participating and making this read along possible. So thank you so much for being here. I'm sure tonight will be especially fun for discussions. So let's go ahead and jump into introductions. And as you can see in my ticker on the bottom, for all of those of you out there in the comments section, be sure to include yourself when we have our lovely questions pop up. So introduce yourself. I can see we have a few of us here. Hi, Amy. It's nice to see you. How is dog sitting going? Let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. We actually have a face that many of you have never seen. Most of you have never seen, but my very good friend Beth Ann, an old college friend of mine who's actually in my book club, where we are also reading Jurassic Park this month. So she has been reading along with us, and I thought it would be a great opportunity for her to come and give her opinion, because it is usually polar opposite to my opinion of books. So that is a perfect way to get a lot of different ideas out there on the board. So Beth Ann, if you want to introduce yourself first, and what did you think was the most surprising scene in the book?
Ooh, I'm Beth Ann, and like Dani said, I've known her for a long time. And I also live in Wisconsin. The most surprising scene in the book, I would say the one that shook me the most, was the baby velociraptor being literally thrown to adult velociraptors that then ripped it apart and ate it. That was that was the most tragic moment in the entire book for me. I was like, yeah, that was rough for me.
Very nice. Laura, you want to go next? We'll go clockwise.
Sure. Hi, I'm Laura. My channel is Book Bubbler. Okay, most interesting scene or surprising scene. I think, are we doing spoilers, right?
Yes. Oh, by the way, everyone, if you're watching this live, you're going to have a whole bunch of spoilers. It's all spoilers all hour long.
Okay, good. Because for me, it was Hammond's death. Because I thought that being the sneaky SOB that he turned out to be, that he might make it off somehow, you know? So I was surprised that he didn't, and, you know, relieved. But yeah, I really thought that he might somehow get off. So yeah, that was surprising in a good way.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Well, as the only non-Wisconsin member of this group, they got a person as close to Wisconsin as possible. I grew up 30 minutes away from the border in the northern part of Illinois, actually. So this is a reread for me, as a reminder for those that haven't been able to check out the previous chats, but it's been 20 years. I pretty much forgot it all. Am I allowed to bring up the surprising parts from the first part, since I wasn't here for the halfway chat?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Whatever you thought was most. Yep.
And that's a good question for Beth Ann too, because I don't know if this is your first time reading or not. That'd be good to know.
Yeah.
I had completely forgotten about that Malcolm scene where he's like, humor me, put in 300 dinosaurs and see what happens. And when it's like 3 times as many raptors, I think my jaw dropped. I was just like, oh, I totally forgotten about that. I just thought that was so cool, the way they did that. For those that don't know, I actually went to college for computer programming originally. And so some of the things they teach you is about like, okay, what happens when you get a result that makes no sense? How do you program a result when the answer is 0? because sometimes machines work very differently. So when you multiply by 0, it can really mess up your programming. So you have to take these considerations into effect. So that kind of is like very nostalgic for me. I can think of like my old professors that are like, now make sure that you program for all the different contingencies. It was just very cool for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I know in the last live stream we talked about that in great length because it's so interesting, the dynamic between these creators and the scientists, how many things they just did not consider in creating Jurassic Park. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But specifically that computer program, because the computer is not going to tell you what you want to know. The computer can only tell you what you tell it to tell you. So yeah, that was definitely a jaw-dropping moment for me as well. But I would have to say for myself and everyone who is out there, I'm Dani. This is my channel, Spinelli Speaks. And the most surprising scene for me, definitely at the end took mine, the Velociraptor, like, being thrown at the other velociraptors. I was like, oh, here's the moment we're gonna see how they're like nurturing, and it's like whatever. And when they just started like globbering that poor innocent little velociraptor, I was just like, what is happening? I was completely like, I felt so bad. And y'all know how I feel about raptors. Like, they freak me out. And I was like, see?
Yeah.
This is what I've been talking about. And then too, I think what also was surprising was the scene at the end. I was really surprised. Like, I almost felt, and we'll obviously talk about this later too, I didn't really care about the last scene where they go to the raptor nest and they count them. And I felt like, to me, I was surprised because it just felt like it didn't need to be there. And
did you want to turn on the music to make them get off the stage? Like, all right, wrap it up, guys.
Yeah. I thought we were done with this. So I was really surprised because the whole way through, I felt like everything was so spot on. It was such a fast, action-packed scene, like book. And then at the end, I'm just like, I don't even want to finish this because I'm done. Like, this is done.
Yeah.
So that surprised me to be just so kind of like let down at the very end. Because I was so enthralled the whole way through. So that was surprising for me.
When that happened, for me, I was trying to parse out because I had similar feelings. I don't know if they're the exact same, but I was like, I was having problems where I'm like, why? Like, just blow the island up, and the island blows up anyways. You visually trying to count the raptors is not a thing. Like, you're not going to be able to count 40 raptors to know whether any escaped, right? So to me, I'm like, it just didn't work logically either. That I'm just like, I didn't hate it. Like, it was still fun for me, but I did have those feelings of wrap it up, guys. Come on.
And I agree, and I actually consider it one of the ways that the movie kind of cleans up all the problems I had with the book. Character-wise, plot-wise, it's like the movie, Steven Spielberg has such a good gauge of what is and isn't going to work, and just says, yep, this works, get rid of that, we don't need it. So
yeah, I think too, what my expectation of that scene was, because of the rest of it, I was really waiting for Mr. Guerrero, or however you say his name. I thought he was going to die in the raptor nest because it was like, you're going down there, someone's going to die. It's velociraptors. So I was just kind of like, yeah. And to your point, Beth Ann, absolutely. I think there's a lot to be said about what was cut for the film and what made that film so, epic, considering the amount of scenes that are in the book, which we will definitely talk about in a little bit. So let's kind of move away from our most surprising scenes. It sounds like we have, thank you, Amy. Gennaro. Okay. We had some great surprising scenes. Most of them kind of the same. Hammond's death, definitely one of them. But yes, lots of surprising scenes. And I think scenes that were good in the movie and some that were good to be left out. So let's kind of talk about, before we kind of jump into our questions, we had a bingo board made by Laura. And I'm just going to, I think I can switch my screen share. Where did I do that? Okay, right here. And we're going to look at that bingo board for a second here. And sorry, this is like, I always have to do this so weird. Okay. So for the first, oh, look at us. There we are. So the first one here is the Jurassic Park read-along. And if you read Jurassic Park, you should have been able to get most of these squares. So we have the Chip Kid cover art, published in 1990, set in Central America, a retelling, and then Skull on the cover. So if you watch the movie as well, you should have been able to get movie released in 1993 and scored by John Williams. Now, I was able to get all of those done, but I just did not do a walk without music. Now, I walk every day, you know, from my bedroom to the bathroom and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and count that. But did everyone else do okay in our bingo board? Laura, how did you do?
I same thing. I did everything except for the walk without music, which I fully intended to do this week, but then my schedule got insane and blew up, so it didn't happen. But I do normally take a walk without music anyways, so yeah, I might do like you and just count like walking around my house in silence as you walk without music.
Yes. So for those of you who are watching, if you did the bingo board, as long as you basically read the book and saw the movie, you were able to fill the entire bingo board. And later, towards the end, I will show you what that Lost World bingo board looks like. It's a little bit different and it's a lot of fun. So I hope that you participate with that as well. It looks like Amy, you have not yet got your hands on the movie to rewatch. I know they all used to be on Netflix and then they were off again. So yeah, kind of stinky, but anywho, and you walk with audiobooks. Does that count without music? Well, you know what? I would say it counts.
The point was to listen for raptors. So like if you could hear something approaching you, which I'm assuming it's not blaring in your ear, you could hear traffic. Like that was sort of the point. So you could hear something creeping up on you. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I took my son he just joined the Cub Scouts. He's in kindergarten.
Oh, fun.
And they do this thing when you're going on a walk. I think it's for the parents, but allegedly it's for the kids, where we all stop for 3 minutes and nobody's allowed to talk or make noises. You're supposed to like listen to nature. I'm just like, this is great. No kids are talking. Like we should do this all the time.
Oh man. We used to, in the car, there was 4 of us growing up and it was always the quiet game. Who can say the quietest the longest? Let's just say that is the dumbest game because it never works. She's talking. He's talking. Anywho, we digress. Let's get into our first question. And I figured this would be a great first question because it's always something that we may.
Are you guys losing her?
Oh,
yeah, she's frozen.
Yeah, you froze.
Okay, so I was just saying, if you were to give this book a star rating, what would you give this book? And whoever wants to go first.
Out of how many stars?
5 stars.
Okay.
Beth Ann, you start.
Okay. I would say I might give this 3.5 stars. For me, I'm much more of a character-driven reader, so this was not as much for me to bite into, but definitely the action-y scenes were very much you were in it. So it definitely is exciting to read, but I don't know if it's something I would reread. So
okay,
3.5, yeah.
Nice.
Laura, how about you?
I would say 4 stars probably for me. It's the first book I've read, or at least one I've read in a long time that had that much science in a fiction book. And I really appreciated all the graphs and all the charts and seeing the code and all that stuff. That was a nice addition to it that really I think, upped it a little bit more, that reading experience. But I really enjoyed it. I could see myself rereading this in future when I had a little more time and I wasn't so like, oh crap, like I have to finish this all of a sudden. But that's a total me thing. I'm always a very last minute person for everything. But yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I liked the writing. It's very readable. I mean, things just clip right along. I thought people were developed enough character-wise, so you got to know them and you could get along with the broad strokes for some, and then the more detailed things with others. It was enough of all the characterization. I liked all of the big action and everything, because it just really sucks you in. Once it starts and once the power is shut especially, then things just keep, it's so hard to put down. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun reading it. 4 stars for sure.
Nice.
Oh, we're going up and up and up. Dani, the pressure's on for you. I'm going to give it all the stars. I'll give it a 5 out of 5. And for people that know our channel, like the Codex Cantina, this is not the usual book that we select. I look at this book much differently than I do perhaps some of the other books that we choose. When I say this book is a 5 out of 5 for me, a lot of it has to do with what did I expect out of it. I just wanted adventure. I wanted things blowing up. I've read it before, so I kind of remembered roughly what happened. I didn't remember the first half is like chlorophyll, more like borophyll. And then the second half is like this crazy ride where you're just like, you can't even breathe because there's so much stuff going on. That's what I wanted out of this book. And I don't know many books that can do like 6 straight hours of just stuff happening and for me to still be interested. So I'll give it a 5-star because that's what I was looking for and that's what it gave me.
I think, Una, you bring up a lot of good points within your star rating, because you said if you're looking for a book that does this, 5-star, right? And absolutely, when you're thinking about the action, you think about that. But for me, because my brain works so oddly and different things go in there, I think about content, I think about writing style, I think about engagement, which engagement is usually what people rate books on. You know, people who read books for entertainment, they usually rate the book on that entertainment value. But for me,
You're frozen.
What a cliffhanger. For me, I give it.
What is it?
This is now we're gonna have to watch the sequel, Lost Finale.
There we go.
Yeah.
Am I back? I don't know.
Yeah,
my
you're
internet says I'm at full power. I don't know what is going on. But anywho, I don't know where I left off, but I'll just keep going. So I usually do content, engagement, creativity, and then kind of mesh all those together. And I would say the entertainment value, the engagement value is definitely really high up there. The writing style is fair, but what I really like about it is the intertwining of the characters. You know, one scene ends and the next scene picks up right at the end of that one, but for a different character. I love that. But there are some scenes that if the ending wouldn't have been the way it was, if that would not have been there, it would have been more of a 4.5, but I'm more in the almost 3.5, 4 area, because there were certain scenes that I just wasn't happy about. And like Melinda said, Malcolm dies. Like, you can't kill Malcolm. And you know what? I know that he is resurrected in the second book, but the one that knew it all, the one who called it from the start, and he lasts the whole book, dies.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense too, because it's like, for the most part, the people that have like problems, like Hammond being like, I'm really into capitalism and I don't care about people. Like, he got his, his catharsis, right? He dies. Why Malcolm? Like, what? He was great. Why do we have to kill him? And I know we're going to have some people that are going to be some Malcolm haters here. And some things he said, for sure, we're going to go to that we're glad that was cut. That doesn't hold up so well. Did we really believe that in the 90s? But hey, I still love him, and I'm sad that he got killed, because it's just like, did he really deserve that? I don't think he did.
Absolutely. Okay, so now that we got our star ratings out of the way, and we've been talking about Hammond quite a bit, let's talk about him a little bit more. So now that we've got it all out of the way, we've read the entire thing, we have seen his character development, so to speak. What are our thoughts about Hammond? Hero, villain, are those even the right words? But it's almost as if, do you feel like he got his just desserts? Do you feel like he was right in what he was doing? What are your thoughts about Hammond? Who would like to go first?
I can go first.
Okay.
I will say, I don't think there's much about him that makes him a hero in this story. I think it's pretty 1000% villain, especially as the story goes on. Pretty much everything that goes wrong in this book can be laid directly at his feet. He has this vision for making money. He hires a whole bunch of people that he does not pay, that he does not listen to a single word that they say. It's like, if you're going to hire the best people, take their suggestions, Donald Trump. Anyways, so if you look at like, okay, well, yes, all the systems went down because he didn't pay Nedry for his work. And like, they didn't know enough about the dinosaurs. Even Dr. Chu is like saying, look, we need to learn more. We need to understand more. And he's like, we need to make money. So, and then you get to the point where he's going to die. Well, he doesn't know that yet. But what's going through his brain? He's blaming every single person, including his own grandchildren.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what, dude? Book version of Hammond, 1000% villain. So
he was written to be the villain, though, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't think that was an accident. Like he was meant to be unfettered greed embodied in one person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To be fair, though, it is his grandchildren's fault that he fell down that hill.
They got the revenge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I know we keep jumping to the movie, but they obviously, someone thought he needed more compassion, and they made him a little bit more lovable. He invited the kids for the kids to get away from the divorce in the movie. Here in the book, we see he's like, well, I'm going to objectify them. I'm going to use them to show that the park is safe to the lawyers and the inspection crew, I guess. What are we calling them? The inspection crew? I don't know. But he's literally got no positives to him in the book, which, maybe some people want more gray character. He was clearly just evil. Like, I don't see any redeeming qualities in him.
Yeah, I really think the only reason why we were looking for redeeming qualities is because we all are so familiar with the movie that we kept like waiting for that moment where he was going to be this, cheery little old man that, gets it. And realistically, throughout the entire book, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And all of his true colors kept coming out. And I think I lost all respect for his character when they explained the elephant situation where he had the miniature elephant, and that's how he got all the investors to, give him money. And the person was explaining how the poor elephant, didn't even have enough space, and it was like all that kind of stuff. So he has no regard for the animal itself, which the dinosaurs are still animals in his care. They still need to be cared for as if they were a kitten. They're still creatures that he's created and he has to care for. And I just feel like it was an entire greed thing. And in the beginning, he kept trying to say this was for science. This was for, something that we've done now. We've been able to do this now. And it wasn't. It was to make the T-shirts and the hats and the video games and this and then that and bring the kids, because really parents bring themselves to amusement parks for the kids is basically his whole theory. So it was just sickening. It was sickening. And he was a complete villain. And I was so happy when those little tiny chickens came and just ate him. So happy.
Yeah, yes to all of that. I think I kept waiting for a more avuncular personality to be apparent. just because of the movie, because I've seen that so many times, and this is my first time reading the book. You know, I was expecting a little bit more, like not even just like a hint of it, but like that you would see throughout as the book went on, you would see like the degeneration of his mental state somehow. Like that's how it would have devolved if it was going to devolve that much. But then to just be from the start, pretty much like he seems nice at first and like, oh, what an interesting concept. And you hired great people. This sounds amazing. And then he starts to be more and more of a jerk. I think for me, the thing that like really sealed it was the conversation with Dr. Wu over ginger ice cream in the first section. You know, that was when I was like, okay, yeah, Laura, give up all hope, because this guy is nothing but bad. You know, like there's no nice smiling Richard here going, this is lovely, welcome to Jurassic Park. It's more like, no, fork it over. You know, I don't care about anything else but me.
Yeah.
So yes, very happy to see him get eaten.
He read to me like a John Steinbeck villain, just completely greedy, willing to take advantage of others.
Yeah.
And you know, there's points to it though that like, okay, in Hammond's defense, like, not that I'm saying all CEOs are like this, but the way that a leader will push for the cheapest solution, that they'll push to get the things out. It was a believable drive for Hammond is the one defense I would say to Crichton's writing. And, you know, people always talk about, well, why didn't you just pay Nedry the money? Have you ever worked for, but like, they always try to get away with the cheapest, particularly when it comes to contractors, salary possible. So to me, it was all plausible, and it set up the right character arc for Nedry.
I kind of feel bad for Nedry in the movie, because in the movie we just think he's a greedy little, you know, not little, but greedy, like disgusting pig of a guy who's just out to get a nice bundle of money. I'm okay with it because it makes for good, you know, film. But in the book, you definitely understand his motive more. You know, he's not just greedy, he is, but he's also like taking what's his. So I can understand his motive and his thought process there better than you can in the film. And it's okay that we keep going back and forth from the book and the film, because they are two very epic things individually, but together they really have great discussion. So feel free to be bouncing back and forth. No worries. There was something else that someone said, and now I forgot it, but it's okay. Let's move on. We have this idea of, and what we've been talking about, you know, Jurassic Park and how it was ill-formed from the start. But if it is all possible, how would it have worked? Could it have worked? What could they have done to make this park work, if anything at all?
Is this an in-universe question or an out-of-universe question?
Oh, good point.
Because in universe we have to accept like, the chaos theory, right? Like you can't control complex systems. Out of universe, in this world, you would start with one dinosaur. You're not going to go create a whole park and just throw them out there on this island and keep it secret. Like even cloning today, there's certain versions of, well, depending on your country, certain forms of cloning are still legal. And you don't just go create a whole ecosystem of things to begin. That's step one, right? Like you don't jump to step 12.
Right. I guess if you're going to answer, just say, would this happen for the book or in real life?
I defer to Sarah, who's not here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beth Ann, it looked like you had something to say.
Oh, just that mostly, like, if I think about in real life, if this were to happen, first of all, these dinosaurs are like super hardy and clones are not. So first of all, you've got that like a huge issue. And I just feel like you'd have a lot more trouble keeping them alive than keeping yourself alive around them.
Beth Ann has a biology background, by the way.
I was turned off by the science almost immediately when this started because of Dodson, his backstory. I'm like, that would never happen. You'd never have a live attenuated rabies vaccine. But They like it's just difficult for me because they have to condense it in time so that it's plausible that other scientists haven't like gotten to the same level, right? So the fact that this happens in like a matter of a few years isn't plausible, obviously, and blah blah blah. It's just me being pedantic mostly, but yeah, I mean, we're, how many years later? What, 25 years later in the real world, and we're still nowhere near this point. Although there's a South American polo player that has 18 clones of his favorite horse because he doesn't ever want to be without that horse. In the real world, which I just think is like my favorite clone fact on the planet. But so real world, what would make it work? Well, I don't know if it ever would in the first place, but in world, obviously, if, as you say, we have to accept Malcolm and his Malcolm effect, then no, it couldn't ever work. But I don't know. The Malcolm effect is a stretch for me to start with, so.
Yeah, that you bring up a good point. Your answer too. I have the central conceit that it is possible to clone. What would make it work then? You addressed also in your point of I don't even think it's possible that you could clone from dinosaurs too. So there's but this became a way more complex answer than you probably intended.
Yeah, I think Melinda here too said, if they only had omnivores, which is like your first thought, like, oh, if we didn't have the crazy velociraptors and all these, meat-eating dinosaurs, it'd be fine. And that was my first thought too, like, oh yeah, if they had all the nice dinosaurs. But see, they tried that with the whole breeding thing. They try to make it better because if they can't breed, we can keep them in control. And like Malcolm says, I want to lean on my Malcolm, they will find a way to survive. So they will find a way to have that, by the ecosystem to have the opposite. So again, it wouldn't work because they'll find a way. it'll just work itself out. And in our world, again, it wouldn't work because of the timing. How long was he working on this project? And he has full-grown dinosaurs? Like, how long does it take a dinosaur to become a full-grown T-Rex?
Yeah, hundreds.
I mean, it's got to take like 25 years. I mean, there's no way.
And then Wu is in his 30s too, to that point too. Like when they said that Wu was in his 30s, I was like, what?
I was expecting him to be older because not to say that a 30-year-old couldn't be that intelligent or be able to do those things. But again, the timing of how long it takes to, and they had several series of these dinosaurs. So
he would have been that smart in his teens and 20s to get the dinosaurs to that point. And that's where I'm like,
yes.
He poached him out of college, right? Wasn't that the idea? But if you're a doctor, that's still what, mid to late 20s, depending. So yeah, that's a quick turnaround. So.
Side note, I always think it's weird when books in the 90s blame everything on the Japanese. Like, oh, the Japanese gave them all this money without knowing any idea of what they were doing. So here's all our money because we want to see something cool. When I read that, I was just like, really? It makes me think of Back to the Future when they're the third Back to the Future when they're getting the car out of the tomb or whatever, and he's like, oh, no wonder this doesn't work. This is made in Japan. Because he's from the 1950s, so he's thinking, it's after World War II. But to me, I'm just like, the poor Japanese, man. This is not fair. Anyways, that was a side note, but any other thoughts about in-world versus out-of-world, if it would work for dinosaurs or Jurassic Park?
No, I mean, I agree with all of that stuff. I'd like to think that if it was ever attempted, that whoever was in charge would actually listen to the scientists and listen to the experts that are telling them like, hey, whoa, dude, we have problems in like these 65 areas that we have to address before we can address the bigger picture. Let's do those first. And they'd be like, okay, let's do that. That's my only hope. If that would ever be attempted, that it wouldn't be the something show that this actually would turn out to be, you know, I mean, so yeah, probably not.
To that point though, like kind of like negatives, but to Michael Crichton's, I'm not saying he's the best writer in the world, but good writing, he's taking how humans make all these small mistakes, right? How the labs didn't forward lab results, how they're like, oh, well, that's probably wrong. We're just going to throw that data out. Oh, we plan to only look for the exact number of dinosaurs we thought were going to be there. All of these human mistakes are what add up to that chaos theory, that unexpected result, how you can't predict every single outcome, and how humans constantly make these little mistakes, I think is good writing that shows it wasn't one mistake for Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
It was a whole series of mistakes that led to this, all human made, which was, I think, very engaging too, just from like a writing perspective.
Absolutely. And I think too, like thinking back on Hammond and how he thinks all these people are going to come to Costa Rica to his park. And I'm thinking there's people that can't even make it to Disney World. How are they making it to your dinosaur park in the middle of nowhere? I mean,
we could charge $10,000 a day.
Yeah.
No, $12,000. We'll have a coupon day.
Yeah.
I won't get one free.
Yeah.
Which I think is funny because now then we see as the franchise has expanded that it truly has come to fruition of this theme park, and well, that didn't go so well either. They did not learn their lesson. So let's go ahead, Beth Ann.
I was gonna say this actually kind of like isn't that far-fetched considering Elon Musk is about to have people pay to be astronauts. Like I feel like if we're talking about super rich people and they want to pay whatever it takes to do this thing that's impossible for most people, it's still going to be a lucrative endeavor when those people are willing to pay whatever because they have an absurd amount of money.
Sure.
But
yeah, if there's enough people that have enough money to keep it going, because I mean, it's got to be expensive to run. I mean, how many goats does it take?
Right.
Where's the goat?
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about science, and I had to really break this question down. I know I sent a different question to y'all in Voxer, so I'm going to read that question because I only had so many characters to be able to put it here in our discussion. But the full question asks, the full question asks or says, science is a very strong theme throughout the book. There's a comment made between scientists' intelligence and the engineers' fintelligence. The scientists' caution and research is neglected to create Jurassic Park, which we've been discussing pretty heavily here. What are your thoughts on the way science is treated in the book? And I think, Beth Ann, you have the most opinion about this and background with your scientific background. So how about you head us off on this? Because I know this was the question you were waiting for.
Well, it's just the thing that is sort of the lingering taste in my mouth that I have from the whole book. It actually kind of, like I said, when it got to the point where anytime Malcolm started talking, I'm like, are you dead yet? Why are we still doing this? It's just him pontificating about science wants this and science does that as if it's a conscious thing. Whereas when Dr. Sadler tries to say, well, isn't that human nature? And he kind of comes back with something that's sort of mildly racist. But like, it just, to me, got so old and too, like, pushing it too far. You know, like, I think when we think about Malcolm in the movie, he's pushing, I think, a good amount, but without pushing over the edge, if that makes sense. Like, he does say, life finds a way. And he's like, look, you scientists, you want to do this and you don't stop to think if you should, and all of these things. And it's a lot of really good sort of food for thought. And this whole thing is a cautionary tale. But when he gets to the point where he's saying, nothing science has ever created is worth anything. And I'm like, well, that's ridiculous. Like, I don't think we should be better off being cavemen working, what did he say, 20 hours a week in order to.
Oh, gosh. That part.
Yeah. The whole thing was making me just like, oh, come on, you're almost dead. Just finish yourself off at this point. But like, it's like when I think about movie Malcolm, that's like the right amount of push without becoming more of a philosopher than an actual mathematician, if that makes sense. So to me, I felt like the book is just a little too hard on every scientist, as if every scientist is only out for the money, which in this book isn't even true, because Chu pushes back against Hammond and says, look, we need to slow down and we need to learn more in this kind of thing. So although his motivation is trying to be the first person to do this, as Malcolm was saying, he's also not, I don't think, as motivated in that way as I feel like Malcolm was trying to make it seem. So
well, I think Crichton's trying to write these different backgrounds too, right? Mm-hmm. And when he's trying to write, because he is an MD, I think, from Harvard, I think it is, general practice. And I think he's trying to write these scientists of, I want to be the first to create this legacy, if you will. The problem is that I think he stumbled a little bit in his mental gymnastics, particularly with Malcolm, because there's some parts, in my opinion, when he's talking about, like, when Hammond's talking about, well, if meat eaters got off this island, they would destroy the world. There's no predator that could stop them. And he's just like, you idiot. Dinosaurs couldn't destroy this world. Even nuclear, technology would destroy this world. It'd come back after 300 years. And I'm like, okay, you're not performing mental gymnastics. You're changing what he's saying. He's saying dinosaurs would eat all the people. You're not more creative. It's just, it was wordplay that just didn't really work for me. But I don't know. I was just like, can we? I kind of wanted someone to get eaten too. Might as well as be Malcolm. I'm with you on that one. Why not?
I did feel like, so I really like Malcolm's character. I like him more so in the first half of the book, which he's not in very much. More than when he starts. I feel like he almost is getting delirious, and everything that he's ever studied is like being regurgitated as he's going in and out of these morphine fits. So I feel like, for me, I'm giving him a pass because I cannot get Jeff Goldblum out of my head. It is Jeff Goldblum. But I do agree. There were some of his little rants, his like morphine rants, that didn't make sense. And I felt like, you said, Beth Ann, he was going over the edge. Like, he was going too far. And some of it didn't even make sense to what his prior beliefs when he wasn't, dying felt like. Like, I think, Una, you mentioned it, the earth, how he's describing how the earth would just take care of itself. And we all know, the earth, yes, it is very old, but, we do have to take care of it because we don't know what it's going to be, what's going to be available for future generations. So when he started to go off on that little tangent, I was just like, you don't even make any sense. You're definitely, something's not right up there. So I did feel like when he was in his death mode, it was just a regurgitation of every paper he had ever written about chaos theory and Malcolm effect and all these things. And the science itself, because I do not have a background in science, and it was probably one of my worst subjects in school, for me as a reader, I could only read it and go, okay, I guess. Sounds good. I mean, even the charts, I would kind of be like, moving on. And the code, I'd be like, sure. The only graph I actually looked at was when we were looking for how many dinosaurs were there. And when I saw the Velociraptor, line, that's the only graph I remember and that I actually probably looked at like line for line.
Yeah.
And then the second time they did that, when they ran to see how many was, and the thing was, is when they showed the T-Rex line and there was only one, and I was like, are you trying to tell me that T-Rex is still sleeping in the lagoon? Because you just, because then like 2 pages later we see the baby T-Rex again, and I'm like, where's the other T-Rex? It cannot still be passed out. So that those are the only graphs I actually read, because for me, science, I couldn't tell you anything about the science of this book. You know, it's just, for me, it's all, you know, fantasy to me, because it's a fiction. So for me, it's just kind of like, sure, it works in this world. I'm supposed to accept that this is what it is. I don't know if that works in, you know, our universe. So it was kind of just like, okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
All good to me.
Well, even his science, you have the counter argument too of like, if the world were to be destroyed by nuclear bombs, et cetera, based on what data? Sample size of 1, like we don't know factually what would actually happen and whether the world would recover or not. So I mean, yeah.
That's why I found his calculations to be so like absurd. Oh yes, I calculated that all this would happen. I'm like, based on what? Like every time he'd say that, I'm like, okay, yes, I get it. You're in I told you so mode, but like also, how?
Well, to be fair, Jurassic Park was built when things work.
Right.
If these computers are, and this is the 90s too, right? Oh, we'll automate the cameras. Isn't that cool? But like, meanwhile, in 2020, we're like, yeah, we kind of know how to do that, dude. Like, but in 1990, a lot of this was when everything works, it's great. That was his argument. Is if something doesn't work, look at all these other things that failed, right?
I immediately thought that when they were talking about the difference between the power, the main power, and the auxiliary, because my first thought was, because I know there's a storm coming, right? Because I've seen the movie. I know there's a storm coming. So my first thought, as I was starting to read that book and as they got into the Jeeps, I was like, did they plan for storms? I mean, this is a very stormy area of the world. So if a storm happened, do they have generators to like keep the power on? Because like, if the storm knocks out the main power, because I mean, I went to a high school where a squirrel got into our main power thing like once a month, and the entire school went out and we all had to go home. So we all waited for the squirrel. So it's possible that if you don't have generators that keep everything running all of the time, you are most likely going to have this issue. So that was my first thought. So that when that scene came up, when they were like, oh my gosh, when we turn the power off, when we turn it back on, it did the auxiliary, which I'm assuming means generators. And then they like only lasted like 5 hours. I was like, what? That's not how you did not prepare for the little storm that could have put your stuff out. Because it was 5 hours. That's all the auxiliary was going to like last. That to me, I was like,
and no fences.
Yeah. Terrible.
I kept thinking of the Golden Girls, like, to misquote Sophia, there's a hurricane coming. Like, because that's totally Hurricane Alley where they are.
Yes.
I mean, that gulf is like, how dumb are you that you're like, yeah, we're cool with 5 hours. Like, that's totes fine.
Yeah.
Let's all go have some more like ginger ice cream. Like, what is wrong with you? No.
You know, I wonder if Michael Crichton has some kind of ice cream addiction, because ice cream's brought up a couple of times in this book. You know, there's the ginger ice cream scene, and then later Lex, when they're in the kitchen, wants ice cream. She doesn't want anything else. She wants ice cream. And I think too, I'm glad that they put that scene. They didn't put that scene, but they put a scene of Hammond and Statler eating ice cream. And I always remember that scene and thinking, how could you eat ice cream at a time like this? Like, you know, they're out there with that T-Rex and you're just like eating ice cream. Like, can you at least just have a bologna sandwich? I mean,
right.
The power's out. It's all going to go bad.
Ice cream.
Hurry before
you don't want to waste it.
Yeah.
The freezers are off.
No. No. They're out in the jungle starving and being eaten by T-Rexes, and you're eating the defrosting ice cream. I don't think so.
Mhm.
So, anywho, talking about victims, let's talk about them a little bit more. So, these are all of the main characters that died. We know that there's like workmen and all that kind of stuff, but they don't matter. So, we have Needry, Ed Regis, Mr. Arnold, Dr. Wu, Mr. Hammond, and Dr. Malcolm. They all perish in Jurassic Park. What are our thoughts about that? When I was typing up these two, because obviously when there are victims, there are survivors, which is coming up next. When I was making these lists, I found it a little, there's definitely connections of who died and who lived. And I wonder if you guys saw that as well. There's only one that's kind of like an odd one. But for our victims, what do you think about our victims?
I think they all
Why
make
do we
sense.
got to start? You got a secret answer and you're not going to start?
Well, I don't want to give it all away right away, but if you want me to.
Sure.
All right, Laura, sorry, you were saying?
Yeah.
No, it's okay. I was gonna say they all make sense because they're all people who either were working for Hammond, who, as we all know, is an evil mastermind, and they all either warned or they figured something out. Like Dr. Wu was like, "Yo, dude, this isn't right," and he's like, "Yeah, that's great. Whatever. We'll just make more money." Like everyone on that list I'm looking on the screen was okay with it at first, or they were involved in the setting up, or they're on the payroll somehow officially. They're all employees of Hammond in some regard, and all of them eat it. So I think that there's like that comeback, like, okay, well, you didn't listen. Like, I feel sort of bad for Dr. Wu the most. I did like Dr. Wu. He's one of my favorite characters, because he kept trying to bring it up and was like, no, this isn't, no, I don't think so. Even when they were asking about what kind of DNA was spliced, it wasn't frog DNA, and he had to go back and check. First of all, wouldn't you know of, like, you only have 13 different kinds of dinosaurs or whatever that is. You wouldn't know which of the few have frog DNA. Like, okay, fine. But when he goes and checks and he realizes, like, this is so terrible. Like, he's with it the whole time and seeing how bad it is. I felt really bad when he died, but I get it because he helped set it up. So I think that's what it is. I mean, they were all part of from the ground up, or they submitted papers somehow, or sent information to Hammond, or they were all implicit, I guess, in some kind of building of Jurassic Park, and it all went to heck. So, yeah, it's fitting, I think, that they all kicked it.
That's exactly what my thought is. Now, Malcolm's a little bit different, and then Mr. Gennaro and Muldoon, but I have my reasons why I think that they were in the survivor list. But it's very Disney to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everyone who was evil gets it, and whoever was good survives, which irritates me to a little extent. And Beth Ann, I love a good happy ending, but I was so waiting for Muldoon and for Guerrero to just eat it. Like, and they didn't. And Malcolm too, I was like so irritated because I don't know how someone can survive the entire book and then just get a little end quote like, "Oh yeah, I didn't make it." What? What? He has this epic like survival of like he's sleeping, now he's up and he's talking about all this stuff, and then he's sleeping, and then yeah, he didn't make it. Nah.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. But yes, I was happy that Mr. Hammond died because his character was terrible and he deserved it. Needry was, it's so hilarious when people try to get away with something and then the thing that they're trying to get away with is ultimately their demise. Ed Regis was a total like little baby. But I liked that scene. Like when he's trying to get the baby T-Rex away from him and they're describing it. And like Dr. Grant's like, "Oh my gosh, it's playing with him." And I'm like, yeah. So I'm glad that he got it. I also thought it was really weird, or not really weird, but just like really interesting how Muldoon takes Regis's leg back. But when they find Nidri, he's just like, nah, leave him.
Yeah. Let's wrap up this leg and save it. Oh, look, the leg.
We'll want to take this back.
Yeah.
Oh, anyone else have any thoughts on our victims? No? Okay, let's talk about our survivors then. So we have Mr. Guerrero, Dr. Grant, Dr. Statler, Dr. Harding, which is the vet, which I thought he was going to die when he opened the roof to the raptors, but I guess not.
Yeah.
The kids and Muldoon. What are our thoughts about those survivors?
To talk about Gennaro, we have to talk about how the characters kind of switched between movies and book, right? Because Gennaro, when you think of like the tropes of like a evil blood-sucking lawyer, quote unquote, usually you expect them to have their comeuppance, but to me, he was like, I never really understood the character of Gennaro, I want to say. Like, reading the book, I'm like, the way they portrayed lawyers, I'm like, do I not understand lawyers? Like, he's making decisions. I usually don't view lawyers in that role in terms of what they're doing and some of the responsibilities that they gave Gennaro. I guess I never really understood his character, I feel like, in the book. And Muldoon, the difference with him is I'm glad he survived. I thought he always deserved to survive because he was the one that, you know, was like, hey, these aren't things you should mess with, guys. So he's kind of the one anti-Disney point of he should have survived but didn't, right? Like he's the one that was sacrificed, but I guess to no avail. So I guess for survivors, I'm not too surprised other than Gennaro, but I didn't understand his character to begin with.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you mentioned this. I froze again. But Ed Regis and Gennaro or whatever seem like they're the same character in the movie. Yeah. So you feel really fine that he gets eaten by the T-Rex.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense, yeah.
But you're right. In the book, Guerrero is like an extra. He's just extra. He shows up in certain scenes and you're like, oh yeah, you're still here. I forgot about you.
Yeah.
Well, the expectations they have of like how he's doing like safety decision, like I don't view lawyers as making those decisions and stuff. Like I didn't understand that at all, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and even at the end where Grant finds him in the maintenance building, and he's like hiding in a thing. And then that's like his whole, like, you haven't done anything. You've been hiding and blah, blah, blah. And I had to disagree with that because I feel like he was trying a lot. He was showing up when he was meant to show up, I guess. But it was just very odd how he was always around. And you kind of get a little bit of his background because he's there to see if it's safe and whatever else for the big honcho back home. But he also like feels no connection to anything. So you don't feel a connection to him because he seems so just irrelevant to the whole story.
He also like judo flipped a velociraptor. What?
Yeah.
What?
Oh. Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Well, they kind of come up with, was that the one where they came up with the excuse of like the velociraptor jumped down, so its ankles were hurt? Like, I'm like, well, come on. He's still not going to overpower and throw a raptor around.
Mm-hmm.
Like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Aye. It's good that Muldoon survived though too. I mean, I wanted more people to die, but
we're going to talk about Muldoon.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah. I think you got it spot on, Una, when you said, you know, he was there and saying you can't treat these. I think that was the only reason why he was there. I think he truly was like, I gotta make sure that they're doing this, or because he knew, he was like, you need to have these weapons. You need to have a way to keep these animals because of their true nature. Like if something happens, you need to be able to control them. So I do feel like he was way more on the side of like understanding the park better than anyone else. So I think it's fair that he survived.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, Muldoon was my favorite character. And when my mom told me that he survives in the book, I was like, well, that doesn't seem fair at all. Like, why does he die in the movie? And then, like, as an adult, I still feel like, well, he gets like a really cool death. Like, he gets to sacrifice himself so that Dr. Sadler can go and turn all the power back on. There's stakes, you know, so he gets a final line and all the things. So I think he's sort of given the respect that his character deserves, even though he dies in the movie. But yeah, I think he, by the rules of the book, he definitely deserved to survive. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, and what do we think about that? So you just said the rules of the book, and I kind of described this Disney kind of like all the bad people died and all the good people. How do we feel about that when authors do that in books? You know, and you brought up John Steinbeck earlier, Una, and that's a great way to like describe it, because in so many classics, a lot of times people you want to live don't. Or they get really crappy things happen to them. How do you think about authors who decide to go this other route where they keep all the good people alive and they keep all the bad people, you know, dead and in really crazy ways? How do we feel about that?
They're writing for the paycheck sometimes, right? Like, audiences want to see evil punished. They want to see good morality rewarded. And that's what I feel like Crichton writes towards.
And do you think, kind of diving a little bit deeper, getting into this critical mind, do you think that that's what separates maybe good authors from exceptional authors? And I say that because, for another example, Dan Brown is one of my favorite authors. Does he have great stuff? It's okay. But I wouldn't compare him to like a John Steinbeck or, you know, some of these authors that really push the limits and give you something so spectacular, but might not be, you know, publicly accepted as something that's great. It's, you know, more of an indie author or, you know, something like that. How do we feel about authors who kind of go this, you know, easy paycheck route? Does that make them a better or a worse author than the next person who tries to push the boundaries?
I'll say, so here's my opinion is there's no such thing, in my opinion, of this is the best author, this is the worst author. I think there's authors that resonate with people. I think there's authors that have things to say that are profound, perhaps, in their insights into humanity and can pull out those things in their writing. Does that make them better? I can't say that that's true. It's the same thing when, you know, and I took a music course in college. I'm a guy that I like heavy metal. I also like jazz. And he asked the question, which one's better? And my mind was blown because it's like, oh, well, there's no such thing as better music. Yeah, there's more complex. Yeah, there's simpler. There's nothing better, though, in my opinion. And, you know, tons of people raised their hands and gave their thoughts. So my opinion is authors set out to achieve different things. It's that old quote, if you measure a fish by his ability to fly, you'll always think he's an idiot or something like that. Like, it's the same thing with authors. I don't think Crichton has set out to say, I've recognized one of the greatest insights into humanity and I'm going to put it into this book. I think he does some good points, though, about science, about man's hubris and our ability to play into that and use that as a means to an end. But I don't think I view that as his strength. And I think that's okay. So to me, I think it's okay that he writes to, well, this is what audiences want, and I think evil should be punished, so I write it. I don't think it's better or worse. I just think it's a style.
Yep, I totally agree. Like, yeah, it's with everybody on here, even just of the four of us, we all have very different reading lives. And even though we read a lot of the same books and a lot of the same authors, we might have some opinions that are the same, some are different. It doesn't matter. It's all very different. And yes, there are a lot of similarities. And you could look at a genre like romance and say, oh, it's all crap because it's all happy endings. And you know where everything is going. What is the point of reading all these things? But you know what? It's entertaining, and people read for all sorts of reasons. There are authors, like you said, for all sorts of things. People have all sorts of motivations for writing a book. If it's like Charles Dickens, you're being paid by the words, so you're going to be verbose as all get out, you know? Like, you're going to really milk that paycheck, boy. So, I mean, I think it's perfect for what it is. I think it's great that there's so much variety, and that there can be these really snooty McSnoots who only read super literary fiction and they know everything and whatever. And there's also stuff that's just like trashy, super fun reading. There's a place for all of it. It can all coexist really easily, you know? It's just personal taste.
I think when it becomes bad is when it's trying to be this and it's not. You know, I worked in a video store for a very long time, and I can tell you that there is a person out there for every movie that thinks it's the best thing they've ever seen. So there are tastes that go everywhere, but also like if you see, I don't know, a movie getting nominated, say, for Best Picture, and you're like, well, that makes no sense because like that's not what it's for, if that makes sense. Like if something is meant to be super entertaining and nobody sees it and nobody likes it and nobody's entertained, then it's bad, right? Whereas if it's trying to do this other thing and it doesn't make that.
Mm-hmm. Sort of like Showgirls gets criticism, not to like talk about a really great movie, but like, you know, it's known as being pretty trashy and terrible, right? But if you're looking at it, it is like just campy fun. It's pretty fun, you know, like it's not serious.
Yeah.
It's not out of Africa. It's not trying to be. It never said it was going to try and do that. So like just, it's all right. It can get Razzies or whatever the heck that was. That's fine.
Yeah.
It can win that.
If it's just coming out to be like what it is, a good time, and you have a good time, then it's winning, right? It doesn't need to win an award because that's not what it's trying to do. It's not trying to be the most artistic thing on the planet. It's trying to make you laugh or have a good time, you know?
Yeah.
So I think,
as we sit here on a stream from Dani, who last year at this time ran a Dostoevsky stream. You know, Dostoevsky and Crichton have two totally different goals in mind, and there's no point in comparing them in terms of their output.
I think we've all made a really good point in describing the fact that there is a variety, and what I like to see, especially when I look onto BookTube and people who review books and talk about books, is accepting the fact that all books have value, in the sense that if the reader finds value in that book, regardless if it's a middle grade, young adult, highbrow, you know, criticism, they all have value, and the reader isn't then dulled down because, well, I read a lot of middle grade, so what, am I only a middle grade reader, or is my criticism only for middle grade? I think what we've all kind of said is there's a variety, and for us, where we find entertainment, you know, varies. And I think accepting that is a really big deal. And I like that. I like that people can, you know, understand that every author has a vision of where their words are going to go, and it might not be the same as the next person. So yes, because Dostoevsky is much different than Crichton, but I think more survived in his. So we talked a lot about the movie, and I know we're past our time, so we're just gonna fly through these last two questions here. But we've already talked a lot about a lot of the differences. But book versus film, there's similarities and there's differences. So there's some deleted scenes, and there's difference in survivors versus victims. I'll just run quickly through ones that I can remember, and we can just kind of say whether or not we feel like that was a good choice, mostly on the director side. So Steven Spielberg decided these are the scenes that sound good, or this is how we're going to change that. But main differences, we had the aviary scene with the they weren't pterodactyl. They were pterodactyls. And then we had the like elongated T-Rex scenes, you know, following them down the jungle river. We had the raptor scene with the putting the stuff in the egg and then having them eat the eggs, which that was quite interesting. We have the baby velociraptor scene, which we already discussed, which is just horrifying. The end raptor scene. So there's a lot more with the raptors, in this book versus the film. And then obviously with the survivors, we know Malcolm survives, Hammond survives, but Muldoon dies. What are our thoughts on how that was adapted? You know, taking those scenes out, switching up those survivors and victims. What are our thoughts there?
I'll say I think they both worked in different ways. I think the book was great. It achieved what it set out to do, and I think the movie did the same thing. I think one of the things that I think is neglected, so let me start with a minor thing here, is what did the book do that I'm sad got cut out from the movie? And to me, I liked some of the whys could have been explained real quickly that did get explained in the book that aren't explained in the movie. Like, why did you bring paleontologists to this island? Like, I never understood that watching that movie. Like, why do you bring a paleontologist to like a live dinosaur island? I'm not really sure I understood that, because they have interest in studying the dinosaurs, but what is the island's interest in the paleontologists? And also some of the science and business background about buying all the amber, about all the costs. It adds, I think, justification to some of the Dennis Nedry decisions that I'm sad that some of the whys got cut from the book, which I think is kind of, most of the cuts were really good things. I think there's probably a few lines, like they should have thrown in why a paleontologist was decided to brought to the island. Why, you know, there were all these startup costs and bootlegging costs that the company had to basically absorb. They needed to turn around to make money. They're already millions and billions in debt before this island opens, right? They need to make money, right? So all of those pressures are missing. And I like how the book kind of explored that a little bit better, would be one of the things that I would say in the defense of the book of I'm sad that got cut.
I would say for me, the biggest difference is less in the plot points that are cut out and more in how the characters are more developed in the movie, especially Dr. Sadler, who isn't even Dr. Sadler in the book. She's just Ellie the whole time. And she gets to be super smart. She's apparently a doctor of everything in the movie. And is also a badass. So I love that. And Laura Dern is amazing. That part where they first see the Triceratops and she's actually crying, like tears are pouring down her face. Like the performances, I think, make such a huge difference between the two versions. But and actually, I love Malcolm in the movie. So like, obviously, there's a lot to be said about the characterizations that I think are stronger in the movie than they are in the books.
Well,
I'd say
I think
women in general in the book too, right? Because even Lex in the book, I'm not. but they flop some characteristics between Tim and Lex, and she became the programmer and had value. Where you're like, okay, everybody has value, and you realize that better in the movie than in the book.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think they definitely, book to film, made the female characters stronger for sure. In the book, Dr. Sadler I don't even think she actually was Dr. Sadler because she was still a grad student. So in the film, they made her much more, what's the word I'm looking for? Developed. She was farther along in her career. And it almost felt like her and Dr. Grant were equals as far as their study. There was even like a little bit of love interest there, but it was better described in the book because when Tim is asking about, oh, are you going to marry her and all this kind of stuff, he explains, oh, no, she's going to marry this other person, which then makes sense in the third movie when she is married. Because I was like, wait a minute, I think there was something there. Because in the movie, it makes it seem like they're like, oh, she likes him now because now he likes kids all of a sudden, which was another trait that we talked about in the first section. But how Dr. Grant likes kids in the book, but doesn't like kids in the movie. But that's his character development, which is I think Spielberg made a great decision there, because it really, for the film, because we have to follow one group of people more distinctly, it was a great character arc for him to be like, ugh. And the beginning of the movie where he's like with the raptor claw with that one boy, to at the end he's got both kids in the helicopter. I mean, it really makes for some cinematic just love on screen. So I'm okay with a lot of the cuts, just because I feel like the movie is so perfect on its own. I really think that they did just a phenomenal job, and I think learning more about the film has made me appreciate it more. I know in the last show, Ryan and I were bringing up the Netflix documentary about how it was made and everything, and it really does make you appreciate it a lot more. So even though lots of things were cut, like the raptor scene with the eggs, was so ingenious. It was such an epic scene. When that was happening, I was like, oh my gosh, Dr. Grant is so awesome. And I like him way more in the book than in the movie. The movie, I'm just like, Dr. Grant, okay, he's great. But I like Malcolm more. He's just more appealing. But in the book, he really, he is a smart guy. He really is intuitive and just is great. So, but I think they're both great. They're both great on their own and together. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. As far as adaptations go, this is just excellent. If you want to see, compare something and have something to look up to as far as a great directorial adaptation of a book, I think this is right up there, with so many classics, as all of us know, we've read a lot of classics, right? So often movies will try to make it way different and radical to be cool and edgy and right on, dude. And it doesn't really work, or they'll totally change things. So I like to read a lot of mystery series, and I like the Hamish Macbeth cozy mystery series set in the Highlands of Scotland by MC Beaton. So there was an adaptation done in Scotland in the 90s, and there are, I think, around 30 books published in the series as of right now. When this was published, there was probably 12 or 15. The TV series took 3 or 4 plot lines from books and meshed them all into one show, 1 hour-long episode, and it doesn't make sense. They added a whole bunch of new characters for no reason, and then took out a whole bunch of really important characters, but then still had their storylines continue otherwise. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen. It's so terrible. Now, granted, really, I think it's horrible. I like the books, but it was oh, dude, no, please don't do this. It was bad. It was just bad. So I really, really loved that. I loved this adaptation. It's so great. And I like that the changes that Spielberg made are very Spielbergian. There's a new word for you. And that it's a happy ending, and it feels like everything is sort of right in the world, but there's that little hint of what if, about some little things, that if you think about it as a kid, you're not going to be aware of it. You're just woo, dinosaurs, But as an adult, you oh, this is interesting. And what if, I don't know about that, but all right, cool. I think this is a great adaptation. I think that they work well together and they work well apart. You don't have to have this extra insight to see how something ends to make it a different ending would make it totally different. I don't know. I just keep thinking too about The Portrait of a Lady by Henry James. That's one of my favorite novels. It's so good and so detailed. And the movie with Nicole Kidman is a great adaptation, but they end way early in the movie. There's a whole bunch of book that happens after the end of that. So I was incensed when I saw the movie. I was but there's 100 pages of exposition, and this person doesn't survive. And this, what are you doing? What are you doing? Makes me so mad. So I think that I think it's great. I think that everything, I don't know. I just love them. I think it's perfect. The book is great. The movie is great. They worked well together. They can coexist happily, and it all just works. I just think it's great. I like them all.
Awesome.
Sorry for the ramble. I feel like I was yelling.
No, that's okay.
I love adaptations so much. I mean, I had a whole class in college on it, and I really opened my eyes to how much directors and the script, of course, affects what actually comes across. And sometimes you watch some stuff and you're like, what is this? What's happening? I don't know. What are you doing with this, dude? I don't understand this. But this makes sense. The adaptations and the changes that were made all make sense. It makes everything flow so much easier, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Absolutely.
I just think it's great.
Well, thank you. I think we're going to skip our last question, which is just our thoughts on upcoming read, which I don't have any thoughts.
Excited.
Yeah, excited. I'm excited for Malcolm to come back. So anywho, I want to thank again all of you for being here. I'm so sorry we went over. I feared that we might, but it was an exceptional discussion. I love hearing everyone's opinions, whether they're the same as mine or not. I want to appreciate everyone who was in our comments and everyone who is watching this in replay. Truly appreciate that as well. Just a couple of reminders. We do have a Discord happening on Ramsey's Discord, so Rajathan. And I have everything kind of linked below. So if you click on there, you should be able to jump in there and discuss the next book together. We have that available. We also have our bingo board. I was going to show it, but for time, I'm not going to, but that's on Laura's channel. And this one's set up not like a bingo board, but it's kind of like a tier. So you become a certain size dinosaur the more you do.
She's frozen.
No, another cliffhanger.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know where I left off, but anywho, there are some upcoming videos as well from Victoria and Ryan and possibly Sarah. So be staying tuned to that. Always look up, our hashtag JP World 2021 because I've been keeping everything in a playlist. So if you're looking for some Jurassic Park stuff, it's definitely in there. And then our next read. So we have the first half of our Lost World. We will discuss that on Saturday, October 16th at 1 p.m. So it's about halfway through, and I think in the description I have exactly what page it is. I think this one's a little bit shorter, but not by much, just a couple pages shorter than Jurassic Park. But yeah, so thank you everyone again so much. I really appreciate all of you being here. It's been a pleasure. As always. So thank you so much for, spending your Friday night with us. Yeah. So thanks so much. Thanks, Melinda.
Thanks for hosting this, Dani.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Okay. Well, everyone else, I hope you're having a great night and happy reading. Bye.
Bye.